Hello viewers, I'm Ron Grant and you're watching 284 Media out of Nature's Little Secrets in the British Virgin Islands. Thanks so much for joining me. With the recent passing of the Cannabis Licensing Act here in the Virgin Islands, many persons continue to ponder the way forward as it pertains to cannabis in the Virgin Islands. What exactly does this legislation mean for residents? What are the pros and cons, and how will it impact the territory moving forward? Joining me today to bring clarity is entrepreneur and cannabis expert and advocate herself, Miss Justine Callwood of Joss Van Dyke out of Foxy's BVI. We talk cannabis licensing, cannabis tourism, and so much more. Now, whether you are for or against, it's a conversation that you don't want to miss. All this and more after a word from our sponsors. Is business slow, cash flow down, hosting an upcoming event? We can help. Advertise with 284 Media and take your business or event to the next level by enhancing your present marketing and messaging strategies. Allow our team of experts to create a personalized ad that sets your business apart from all the rest. This could be your business or event. So, what are you waiting for? Contact our marketing team at 284media@cctbvi.com. Advertising with us works.
Yes. You want top of power?
You want top of power?
Join the prepaid party with CCT and enjoy more affordable data plans, more top-up promotions, more savings with hero bundles, and more value for your money each and every Tuesday with Top Up Turn Up Tuesday. Visit a CCT store today or anywhere CCT Top Up is sold and top up your phone.
5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. You want top of power?
Viewers, welcome back. Miss Justine Callwood of Foxy's, the one and only. Welcome to 284 Media. Thank you so much for taking this time with us.
Thank you so much, Ron, for having me. It's quite a pleasure to have been invited by such a distinguished gentleman.
I appreciate it very much. Now, we have been having a lot of conversations on cannabis, probably before my time, to be honest with you. Your dad, Feliciano, the one and only Foxy Callwood, along with other persons such as Senator Positive Nelson, and also our present Minister for Agriculture, Dr. the Honorable Natalia Wheatley, for years have been advocating on different levels for cannabis. Before we get into the act and all that happens or is going to be taking place, explain to me a little bit about how you were introduced to the world of cannabis.
Well, I think that introduction came fairly early. I wouldn't deem myself to be a cannabis expert, as you earlier introduced me as. However, I think it's always been part of my life, even if it wasn't part of my life that I actually embraced or indulged in. Cannabis was a natural part of my early childhood. It was something that I saw growing, that I saw drying, so it was always part of our existence. But it was never something I was interested in trying. And in fact, had a fairly negative response to it as a child and as an early adult.
At what point did you actually begin being more familiar with cannabis and its benefits? At what point?
Well, in my early 30s, I saw it cure stage 4 cancer, colon cancer metastasized to the liver. And I was so impressed with those results that I thought it would be silly if I would deny them to myself.
Wow.
And as such, I started trying it and experimenting and was quite happy with what I found out. And also research in terms of other people's experiences.
Okay. Now we are at a point in the BVI where we have recently launched the Cannabis Licensing Act. And for many persons who are still very much confused as it pertains to what this means. Now, both you and I had an opportunity individually to go through the act. Explain to me, what are your thoughts on this recent act?
Okay, well, before I address any specific things, I will say that Dr. Natalia Wheatley approached me at a recent meeting and said that some of these items with which I had actually had a problem had been changed or modified.
Okay.
So I'm currently unaware of what the present scenario is in some ways with the bill after it's been to committee. However, the first glaring thing that popped out at me was the disproportionate jail time and financial fining. It seemed excessive for a product that was being moved from a Schedule I drug to even a medicinal idea. The fact that jail times could be so punitive seemed excessive.
Okay, there are a lot of persons, I'm glad you mentioned the jail time, because there are a lot of persons under the misconception that with the passing of the Cannabis Licensing Act, this means somewhat for free-for-all. Persons can smoke or partake in cannabis as they like, but this is far from the truth. Speak to that a little bit.
Well, I think it is far from the, not only far from the truth, I think it might be farther from the truth than we would like it to be. I think I think we all feel that cannabis should at some point have a level of control, and it should be accessed and utilized by the government. I fear, however, that given the parameters of this bill, including the fact that there will be only one tenant or shareholder
Correct.
as a main grower, and that everybody else will fall underneath, that possibly that the opportunities for expansion won't be as quick as could be possibly done if we had multiple owners or
Okay.
multiple investors.
Understood. Now, as we look at the whole Cannabis Act, as I mentioned before, persons like Senator Positive Nelson and your dad have been advocating for not only the decriminalization, but a lot of different methods. Why do you think we're now only coming to this point in the Virgin Islands where we're not only licensing for medical purposes, but just really and truly having the conversation? What has taken us this long?
Well, I think there's certain prejudices that actually we haven't been completely honest about. I think even our ban on people with Rasta or dreadlocks coming in that
I remember that, yes.
existed in the late 90s, early 2000s, I think it's almost naive of us to think that that prejudice has been erased already. And I think that there are several people in our community that is, one, hesitant to admit to being interested in cannabis, using cannabis, or even interested in it being legalized.
True.
So I think that both community unawareness or fear of being labeled or seen through a certain light is definitely present.
As we look at cannabis in general, what do you think are some of the major misconceptions that are kind of serving as blocking factors for the general public as it pertains to the usage of cannabis?
With the general public?
Yes.
I think one of the biggest problems is simply knowledge in terms of the number of ways that cannabis can be integrated into a community, in terms of products that are simply products for sale, products made in the BVI. And then there's the aspect of the drug and medicine. And I think people aren't aware of the full range that is possible, especially as we undertake to grow and can choose which strains we would like to grow, and also which diseases, which sicknesses we would like to match the cannabis we are growing with.
Okay. You mentioned recently just now about products and services. You come from the hospitality industry. Let's talk a little bit about cannabis tourism and the possibilities of this in the Virgin Islands.
Well, I think there's a few different ways we can go. I think everybody has kind of said it's either adult use, which is recreational, or strict medicinal. And I think to the government's credit, they are attempting to find a mid place. But there's the idea on one side of recreational use, where people, if they want access to flower while they're on vacation, simply that ability to smoke, they would have that ability just as they'd have access to alcohol, or that they could have access to these products within a more holistic concept, either at a spa or a retreat. And then there's also the usage of CBD products, which would primarily be body products and used within a spa situation as well, but not as medicinally.
Okay. From the hospitality industry, is this something that you think could absolutely benefit that industry as it pertains to cannabis and really revitalizing it as well, presenting a different option? Do you think that should be considered?
I think it should be considered. I think it would be hard for it to be truly considered under this bill. I think we have to realize that much of this also relates to branding, We, even with the inclusion of our tourist market, have a relatively small cannabis market. But what we have are numerous personalities that could be and are associated with both cannabis and mushrooms.
Okay.
And branding could be a significant and play a significant role in the amount of money that local businesses made. So while they wouldn't necessarily have to sell lots of cannabis per se, their identity could be in part reflected. T-shirts, hats, I think much of what Foxy's has already done could be further magnified with the addition of cannabis, with certain strains and certain ideas that go along with it.
Okay, now for the persons who are not aware, there are different strands of weed. Let's break that down for them a little bit. The different strains, sorry.
Well, there are three main headings. Those would be sativa, cannabis indica, and cannabis ruderalis. Ruderalis is typically would be hemp. That is what would create products like ropes, sails, fibers of every kind. Sativa and indica are primarily what are spoken about when we're speaking within a medicinal framework.
Okay.
Sativa is more of a uplifting, less body high, whereas an indica is a shorter, while it grows quicker, it's also a much more sedative product.
Okay.
But both can be used and both can be cloned and mated together to mix those effects. But there are thousands and thousands of strains of cannabis that all fall under those three basic headings.
With the Cannabis Licensing Act and the fact that we spoke about investors and more so seemingly the exportation of cannabis, do you feel as though, in your opinion, this would be enough of a viable financial industry for the territory, with the market already being so saturated regionally? Because to be honest with you, we seem to be pretty far down the ladder in coming to our senses a bit in reference to legislation. So is that enough for this to be of significant financial benefit to the territory?
I think that's a tricky question. I personally don't really see that $30 million figure that was being used based on export numbers to be a realistic one, especially given the way in which the growing structure is set up. There might be factors that the government are aware of that may precede my knowledge, including this investor and their opportunities for export. However, I think that what is a much more healthy economical situation for us, and given that we are understanding the effects of cannabis, I think it's silly for us to deny the effects to our own community and focus primarily on export. I think what would behoove us would be to focus on the possibilities cannabis holds within our community and to be integrated within our structure. Because when it's purely something that's growing for export, it's still this idea of a drug or a thing that is separate from us.
Okay.
But I think it has the ability to be seen as something that's part of our community.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Now, we would all remember for years gone by, every year, Foxy's hosts the Hemp Fest. The ability for persons from all creeds and cultures come together and share their products and talk about the effects. We've had a number of speakers over the years, a number of performers. Of course, Luciano. We would all remember Positive Senator Nelson from the U.S. Virgin Islands coming over and discussing and having the conversation. First of all, I'd like to commend you and your team at Foxy's for the ingenuity in bringing Hemp Fest to the Virgin Islands. And secondly, how much of an impact do you think that this has had on the recent conversations now that we're seeing? Because at first, to be honest with you, persons with the mental block, it's almost as though it's a bad thing for some persons when they heard of Hemp Fest. But now we see the culture changing a bit. How much of that would you attribute to the conversations that you guys have been having?
I don't know if there's a specific percentage amount. I will say that the response we have gotten has been overwhelming in terms of people's appreciation, both for our willingness to speak and for our willingness to speak about a subject that is so important to our country as a whole. I think that as you said, bringing these performers allow for people who are external to our community to lend a level of validation and to kind of give us encouragement that we're going in the right direction. I think the reggae artists, being from Jamaica, who are a little bit ahead of us on this,
Yes.
are definitely a much braver lot in terms of being willing to speak their opinions and be incredibly frank about the subject.
Wonderful. Before we go, Justine, I want you to just speak to the general public as it pertains to cannabis. There is still a lot of misconception, but what do you think we should be paying more attention to as residents when we consider not only the Licensing Act, not only medical cannabis, not only possibly decriminalization, but overall, as you think of cannabis, what would you like persons in the BVI to understand most about the entire conversation?
I think I would really like them to understand the wide range of uses for cannabis within our community and why it is essential as a medicine. Along with many other plant medicines we are primarily not aware of yet, for us to not only be able to know how these work, but also to be able to use them for ourselves. At a time when big pharmaceutical companies have created monopolies that make it difficult for us to think of curing disease in any other way except a patented pill, I think marijuana is providing an option that, should we choose to embrace it, allows us to answer a lot of our sustainability questions.
Wonderful, Justine. Thank you so much for stopping by. It was a pleasure speaking with you, and it's always a pleasure seeing you. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on this very important piece of legislation and topic in general.
And thank you, Ron, for being willing to address it so honestly.
You're most welcome.